The government uses two powerful new weapons to attack the left-wing unions. One is Coast Guard screening of maritime workers, which eliminates suspected radicals from working on ships. It begins in the fall of 1950 through the Port Security Act, based on a Senate report calling for securing the nation's seaports, quote, against sabotage through conspiracy of subversives and moral perverts. MCSU members like Ted Rolfs, Bill Watkins, and Nikki Blair are escorted down the gangway one day. By January 1951, the Coast Guard has removed nearly every left-wing steward from West Coast ships. 3/4 of those screened are African-American men. At Nikki Blair's appeal hearing, they ask him if he's a homosexual, and they ask him if Hugh Bryson, the president of the MCS, is queer too. Why do you want to know about our president? Nikki snaps back. Do you want to go out on a date with him? The government uses its other powerful weapon, the Taft-Hartley law, by declaring the MCS hiring hall illegal, postponing its strikes, and forcing its leaders to swear they're not communists before they can hold elections. Self-identified right-wing dissidents within the MCS used Taft-Hartley to set up a rival union. They're anti-communist, anti-gay, and attack the MCS for giving, quote, special rights to Negroes, quote. They're encouraged when the CIO, in its own anti-communist purge, kicks out the longshore and cooks and stewards unions, along with other left-led unions. Most black stewards stay with their union, but white men are split, including the gay stewards, who start to take sides and attack each other. Conflicts between the factions on the ships escalates into riots on the piers. In December 1953, thousands of white, right-wing stewards and sailors, armed with bottles, knives, clubs, and guns, march along the waterfront to Pier 39. They want to take over a ship that is still controlled by the MCS, the original MCS. The marchers break through police lines, and they attack a multiracial group of longshoremen and stewards. After a violent struggle, police and MCS pickets win this battle and turn back the right-wingers, but the MCS is not winning the war. Within a year, the right-wing union, under government-supervised election, takes over the MCS, even though nearly all of its members vote to stay independent. Then the MCS president, Hugh Bryson, is charged and convicted of perjury under the Taft-Hartley law for stating that he wasn't a communist. He's sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. J. Edgar Hoover's FBI agents stalk Frank McCormick, Mickey Blair, Jimmy Vieira, and the other screened seamen. FBI agents keep a 24-hour surveillance, outing stewards as homosexuals and communists to their families, landlords, and employers, getting them evicted from their homes and fired from what few jobs they could find. The members of this tiny union could never win their David and Goliath battle against the combined forces of Congress, the Coast Guard, the FBI, the ship owners, the CIO, the AFL. But they went down fighting. It's remarkable they held out for so long. Their history is unknown today because through fear and intimidation, it was first rewritten as un-American activity, then dismissed as an insignificant failure, and finally erased from our nation's memory as if what they had achieved had never even happened. What happens to a dream deferred? In the early 1960s, if you wandered along San Francisco's waterfront, you would see little evidence left from the great battles that once were fought on these now empty streets and piers. The American passenger liners are gone. Their owners registered them under foreign flags to avoid U.S. taxes, safety laws, and unions. Shipping declined and the piers grew deserted. But gay men of many races continued to occupy the old waterfront haunts, bringing them back to life as gay bars and restaurants. Over in the Castro district, which isn't a gay neighborhood yet, you might run into Frank McCormick and Mickey Blair, who have set up house together in an apartment upstairs from their pal, Jim Vieira. Jim is still working as a steward on the ships. He successfully appealed his screening. Frank works as a waiter in a restaurant. Mickey works as a nursing attendant. A few years later, Frank McCormick and Mickey Blair moved to Seattle and buy a house where they lived together for years. After Frank died in the 1970s, Mickey still found ways to keep his militancy alive. In the 1990s, he joins ACT UP in Seattle and he performs in a gay theater group fighting the religious right. Although Mickey is passionate about gay politics, he knows that the gay movement is missing the commitment to working class folks and people of color that he learned in the Marine Cooks and Stewards Union. He still dreams about militant unions with visible gay leadership that are dedicated to racial equality, economic justice, and solidarity across many lines. We proved that it could be done, so it's not just a dream. We can do it again. And Blair adds, only differently this time. And I want to add one final slide that was not in Allan's show but is in our book. This is Allan Bérubé and Mickey Blair after one of Allan's oral history interviews. Raise a few points after sharing this slideshow, or this edited version of Allan's slideshow. I'm eager to hear in our discussion what you take away from this story, but I just want to mention 4 points that I hope have come through. One is Allan as a community public historian. The language he used, the tone of his talk, I think evidence his commitment to teaching history through stories, to creating an accessible format that would hold his deeper analytic underpinnings. The text is dramatic, almost cinematic, written in the present tense with plentiful illustrations to create visual as well as audible impressions. Second, I hope that Allan's commitment to interrogating race and class at every turn has come through in this version. By showing the intersections of labor and queer history in the work culture of Marine Cooks and Stewards, by identifying an admittedly rare historical precedent for including gender and sexual identities within the framework of labor solidarity, and by foregrounding race, the experiences of African American or Asian workers, for example, but also focusing on the exclusionary practices based on whiteness. Third, I want to point out Allan's way of complicating historical context for labor history. Yes, there's the role of the Communist Party in enabling radical and queer organizing, even as the official party line excluded homosexuals. Yes, there's the impact of Taft-Hartley and McCarthyism on the demise of the radical MCSU. But he also acknowledges the collusion of gay cooks and stewards in that process in the 50s. Finally, his signature intervention, looking forward. Allan tried to identify the best and the worst practices in the past to give us choices about what to follow. Closing his slideshow with Mickey Blair as an ACT UP activist in the 1990s, and with the quote invoking the possibilities for a better movement next time around, that was quintessential Allan Bérubé. Never giving up hope, uncovering the heroes and heroines who might inspire us in the future, but always alert to calling out as well the pitfalls that we would face even as we follow in their lead. Thank you. I want to mention one other show and tell besides the book about World War II and the collection of Allan's writings. I brought with me, if anybody's interested, the finding aid of Allan's papers at the GLBT Historical Archives, and you can get a sense of how much of all the research, all the oral histories, some videos of the oral histories, the drafts of the book, everything is in there for anybody to use.